Okay, let's try to make some geometry without using any primitive objects to start. What I'm going to do here now is rotate my view around to make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to use my Alt key and rotate to a top view. Now I can do this in many different ways. Again, using the Alt key, I can use the little widget here, and with Y being up, I can click on this widget to place me in a top-down view. Alternatively, I can click this little icon here with the camera on it and scroll down here to where it says top. The keyboard shortcut is number 7. Either way, I'm now in a position where I'm going to place some points down and start to use the tool called Points to Polygons. Let's just zoom in, and I'm going to be working in this space here. So a prerequisite here, when we're using a tool inside the modeling room, some tools you'll notice come with a little tiny check mark in the corners. This means that they've got extra tools associated with them. The Points to Polys tool here has a quads tool associated with it, which we'll look at shortly. So with the Points to Polys selected, I want to draw your attention to this area here in the interface, because some tools also have additional functionality which you can access in this small area here. So let's start by just placing some points down. So with the tool selected, I'm just going to hit the left mouse button and place my first point. And I'll continue and create some more points. Now, when I roll over or in between these points, you'll notice that 3DCoat gives me a preview, and it's asking me, do I want to put a quad between these two points, these points? If I right-click the mouse button, it will do so. If I roll over these three, you'll notice it tries to say, do you want to put a triangle here instead? And if I did the same on the other side, another triangle, leaving that one vertex free. In this case, I want to make a quad. So I'm going to right mouse button and click to create that quad. Now this doesn't mean that I've got to use the quad in this particular shape. If I right click over a vertex, then I can move that around and I can change the shape of my quad like so. But for now, let's keep it in a square shape. So once I've put down my first piece of geometry, I can now add to this, and I can add some extra points. It doesn't matter the order of these points. I can come back here and maybe create a couple of more points in between. And you'll notice as I'm doing this, 3DCoat is constantly trying to ask me whether I want a quad or a triangle. So be sure to look at the preview first to see what kind of polygon you're going to be creating. Here I just want to create quads, so I'm going to make sure that no triangles are previewed before making them. It doesn't matter also of the distance between the edge that you've previously created and any new points that you're trying to make. So let's go over to the left here and place 2 points down here, and you'll notice it once I hover over the middle, then I can create a poly in that space. Let's continue all the way up to the top in any order, and I will just create some more quads. Now you may notice at the top here I've got some extra functions, as I mentioned earlier. These are to do with the control key and the shift and control key on the keyboard. So some tools come preloaded with extra functionality depending on whether you press the control or a combination of keyboard controls. Here I've got a menu of different tools that I can use when pressing the control key, and the same for shift and control. I have the same menu, but I can use a different tool for this keyboard combination than this one. Also notice in this menu on the left side of the screen, I have an add and split tool. And down below here, I have a split rings tool. And these are tools that are available inside this menu. So the Points to Polys tool can come preloaded with additional tools inside. Now the ones that I've chose are for the Control keyboard shortcut, split rings, and for the Control and Shift keyboard shortcut, add and split. So let's test these out. First of all, I'm going to use the Control key on the keyboard, and you can see that once Control is pressed, then I have an option to split these polys. So let's do that. I'll click the left mouse button to split that geometry, and if I roll over these polys, then it will try to split that row for me. If I hold down Shift and Control and use the Add Split, you'll notice here that if I hover over an edge, then it's asking me to make a starting point or where to start splitting these particular polys. So let's do this one to start with, and then work my way down, and I'll terminate here. So with that done, let's say for example I'm not happy with the split tool command that I've just done. If I go down to the tweak section here, you'll notice I've got two tools here that will help me to correct this geometry. Delete edges. So if I choose delete edges, as I hover over any edge, it's asking me to select the one I want to delete. In this case, I'm not happy with these two edits that I made, so I will delete these two edges. Additionally, with the delete polys tool here, I can now click and tap and remove geometry. If I click and hold and drag, I can drag select and brush away any polygons. So here, for example, if I click my left mouse button and hold it down and continue in a downward motion, I will delete those polys. And up again. So we're back to where we started. Let's go back to our Points to Polys tool here and focus on this section here where it says quads only. What I'm going to do is place a couple of points down, and then I'm going to hover over this area. Now notice that quads only is unchecked. So this means that when I roll over this portion of those points, then a triangle is being previewed. Likewise on this side. However, let's now check this, and you'll notice it doesn't matter where I place my cursor inside here, it will only preview a quad. So this limits the accidental addition of any triangles to your geometry should you not want any triangles in there. So there is another tool that you can use with the Points to Poly, only it's a little bit further down in the interface, and it's this one called Clear Points. So let's have a look at this one. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put down a range of points here, and let's say that I'm creating my geometry and I get to this point and I'm happy with the amount of geometry, but I've created too many points. If I use the clear points, any points that I've placed down that are not connected to other polygons will be cleared from the workspace, like so. Okay, let's take a look at the last item on this menu here with regards to the Points to Polys tool. So I'm going to click the small icon here, which is the axis. We also have a representation of our axis here as a widget. If I rotate the camera around, you can see that we have this axis with our Z, Y, and X. Now, right at the beginning, we rotated around and snapped, so we were looking directly down the Y axis. And if I rotate the camera this way and snap to there, I'm now looking down the Z axis. Let's return it to the Y, and I will turn off the axis here. Now let's have a look at the on plane, because the on plane refers to these axes and it's important to understand which axis we're using. So when I click on the on plane checkbox here, you'll notice that my cursor changes to this red square, and you'll see a parameters box for the on plane feature. You'll also notice here that we've got some axis buttons that we can click in order to tell 3DCoat which axis we're going to be working in. So for example, if I click on here, nothing changes because now I'm working on the Y axis. However, if I click the Z axis, you'll notice that my cursor now changes. It's not disappeared, but it's no longer visible in the Y axis. If I rotate my camera around and snap back to the Z axis, now you can see I'm working in this plane on the Z axis. So let's rotate this back, and now I'll click Y, rotate, so I'm looking straight down the Y axis, and we're back to where we were. Now I also mentioned here that we've got some values in these boxes. We have 3 boxes going across with values in them, X, Y, and Z. We can reset the values in here by clicking this little X, and that will zero out all those axes. So with that done, let's make a start and have a look at this on plane feature. What I'm going to do now is start to put down some points, and again right mouse to create the polygons. Now if I rotate the camera around, you'll notice that on the Y axis I've created polygons with a value of 0, 0 in the Y axis. In other words, they're sitting flat on the grid. So let's go back here now and change this value to 25. And I'll drop a few more points down. And if we rotate the camera around, you'll notice now that these new set of polygons have a value of 25 in the Y axis, which means they are sitting higher than the previous set at value 0. Let's just move over a little bit more, change the Y value to 50, and start to create some more points. And when we rotate around again, as you'd expect, now the last set of polygons we created is now 50. Previous was 25, and the first set we created were at 0. So we've got this stepped effect on the generation of our polygons based on the value we placed inside of this field. Now this works in the same way for all the axes. Now this is an important feature because not only is this used in the modeling room, but it's also a common tool that's used in the sculpting room as well. So like before, all we need to do now is right mouse, and we can bridge these polygons as we did previously. If I just turn this one off, it doesn't really matter if it's on or off, as we did before, and start to right click to create the polygons in between. So now I've started to create those polygons in 3D space rather than looking down a single axis and working on a single plane. Now that we have our mesh created, you may have noticed that we have 2 separate colors for the mesh. Here we have our polygroups panel, and we have a layer called polygroup 1. If I toggle the visibility of this layer, we can see that the mesh contained on the layer is all the same, even though we have separated colors. If you've come from ZBrush or a program like ZBrush and you're used to dealing with polygroups, you may assume that these are 2 separate polygroups because they're color coded differently. However, the name polygroup represents the total mesh on this particular layer. If I was to come in here now and bridge these and create polygons to bridge these 2 separate polys, then you can see we have a single uniform color. If I want to change the color of this, I can come up to here and use this colors button here and select a new color. One last thing to look at is this option here under the points to polygon. Plane defined by right mouse. So previously we were adding values into the Y to define the plane. However, if we have, like we do, some geometry which has already got some values defined, 25 and 50, we can use the right mouse button to define those planes. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click the right mouse button on one of the polygons that were at 0, and then I'll put a couple of points down and create some polys. Those were created on the same plane. Let's rotate back. Now let's click on the 25 value previously. You'll notice we've got an update here of 25. Let me just move this over, and now if I put some points down, you'll see those were created on the value of 25 in the Y. And finally, let's go over to the one where we put a value of 50 in. Right mouse, you notice it updated, and now create those polys on that plane. It doesn't matter when you turn the on plane feature off. Whenever 3DCoat finds 4 vertices, it will always try to give you a preview of the polygon it can create if you want to press the right mouse button. Let's take a look now at the quads tool. So if you remember, we had a quads tool nested inside the points to poly. So when I select the quads tool, then those two reverse. So now quads is the main tool and the subtool is points to poly. So with the quads tool active, again, notice the top menu here changes for this particular tool. And we have an extrusion method that's been added to the menu with a drop down these options. Let's zoom in a little bit and work on this section here and investigate this tool a little bit further. So the first one it chooses is called the 2-click method. If I roll over an edge, in this particular case, you'll see it highlights with the quads tool active. If I left mouse click on the edge, then I get a preview in the same way, asking me where I want to put those 2 points down next. So I've left click there, and it completes the polygon for me. Now, depending on which edge I roll over, it will automatically try to start the next extrusion based on the edge I roll over. So I'm going to continue in this direction and do my 2 clicks to complete the quad. To drop the tool, you'll need to hit escape. So instead of placing vertices down, I'm extruding the edge of an existing polygon now, and the options that I have here give me different methods of an extrusion. So we've looked at the 2-click method. Let's look at the parallel method here. So again, I'll need to roll over an edge to start the process and left click to start the tool. Now when I pull out the extrusion, you'll notice that the second edge that I've pulled out is now parallel to the first edge that I clicked on to initiate the tool. So it will always run parallel. So now I only have to left click once to create the quad. And it's very good for creating straight quads. If I roll over the other edge here, and I can start to move across and go in a different direction. Again, escape to drop the tool. The next method here is called direct. So here I'll go onto this poly here, and again, same process, left click, and this time this is not parallel to the first edge that I clicked, and I'm able to direct the flow of these polygons like so. Now, one thing to notice about this tool is that if I bend this polygon and try to direct it in a very harsh way to the side, notice how the second edge becomes shorter than the original edge. And if I commit this polygon, I get this very distorted polygon created here. So the next one here is the trapezoid, and I'll click to start the tool, and this one is exactly the same as the direct version, only you'll notice that the second edge does not collapse. It remains as the original size of the first edge that was selected. So now I have a consistency in the polygon size based on the first edge that I selected. So this gives me a more even spread of polygons when I redirect the flow of those polygons, for example, around this corner. So one more thing we can look at here is I'm going to change my extrusion method to parallel, and click on this, and I'm going to make a few more polygons down here. Now, if you notice, I want to bridge these gaps now. We already know that we could use the points to polys here and simply bridge those, but let's use the quads tool and use one of these methods to actually bridge instead. So let's take this one for example here, and I'm going to click on, and when I reach the edge that I want to connect to, 3DCoat will snap to the points of that edge. So it's a very good way to make sure that you're going to be welding these points together, in other words making a complete mesh. Let's try it again on this one. I move over, and when I get close to the edge I need to connect to, 3DCoat will snap, and then it's just left click and then escape to drop the tool. As mentioned before, the quads tool also has the on plane feature, and if we enable that for the quads tool, you'll see we get the similar cursor change that we had before. If I reset these values in here and use my parallel extrusion method, I can now right click over the top of a polygon and extrude that polygon out. If I escape the tool, turn the camera around, you can see that I was extruding polygons using this quads tool on the same plane as previously. Let's jump back over here, and now I will right click on this polygon which was at 25, and now I'll extrude out at this value. I'll right click on this one set at a value of 50 on the y-axis and extrude out on that value. And if I rotate round, you can see that now I'm at that level, corresponding level of the value set on the y-axis. So that's why it's important always to look and check at the top to make sure of the parameters set for each of these individual tools, some of which have common elements such as the on-plane feature. In the next video, we will delve into the mirroring functionality within 3DCoat and explore other powerful tools available in the modeling workspace.